Welcome to the Visible and Unstoppable podcast. I am your host, Louise Kirk, and I support female change makers to take bold action in their business so they can make more income and more impact. Today, we're all talking about the fear of success. Now, you might be like, Louise, that's crazy pants. Who would be afraid of succeeding? And I actually find that most of my clients are more afraid of the fear of success than they are of failing. And I'm not sure if this is just the demographic of these women who are already feeling perhaps overwhelmed in their lives, but they have this great fear of success. And I'm going to break it down for you because maybe you also hold this great fear of success. And I'm going to name only just 3 ways in which this shows up. So the first story that women typically hold when they have this fear of success is because they think success is going to be really overwhelming. They have got this idea that if they become more successful, they'll have more responsibility, they'll have more workload, more decision making, and they're already at capacity. Perhaps they already have a job, or they have kids, or they're doing way too much in their household, in their relationships. They're the caregiver and caretaker of everybody else. And the thought of taking on anything else is like, nah, it's going to be way too overwhelming for me. And so although rationally they're like, I want to succeed, I want to be making more money, I know at this rational level, if I have more money, I can hire people to help me. But that story that they hold around success being really overwhelming stops them from moving forwards. And for some of my clients, this looks like sabotage, right? They get to a certain point in their business and they step back. They like withdraw. And then they start bringing their income and their results down. And then they wonder why, or why they can't hit past a certain point in their business. Because at a subconscious level, they're stepping back to make sure they don't have that success and they are not overwhelmed. And typically what I do with those clients is to firstly shift that story, but also look at all the different areas of their life which are already overwhelming. So you can start to create that space and that capacity. And when we start to do that, all these other stories come up, right? I have to be the caregiver of my children. I couldn't possibly ask anybody else. I have to be emotionally responsible for my husband. Usually this comes down to either that's what they've experienced growing up, or they want to keep control over the relationship and over the situation, even though deep down they really want their partners to step up and take on more. And they're sitting there in resentment and frustration, and they're like, they just don't do enough. And when they delegate something rather than handing over responsibility, there's a difference. When they just delegate a task, they're sitting there in their mind going, they're not going to do it right. They're going to forget. They're going to do it wrong, and I'm going to have to step in. And guess what happens? They don't do it to the standard, so they get an earful. And that person takes it back on, right? Gee, I was right. I knew they weren't capable. I knew they'd let me down. I knew they didn't really care about me, because if they really cared about me, they would do these things, because can't they see I'm so overwhelmed? These stories and this need for control that often keep women also stuck in this caregiver role in their relationships, which also stops them from having the capacity to be able to spend that more of that energy and that time in their business, because they're constantly guessing and second guessing and gauging, how their partner's going, how the kids are going, how these other people are going, and stepping in and spending too much time and energy in that space. And so what we do is we shift a lot of the stories, both around success being really overwhelming, but also looking at all the areas in their life where they're currently feeling so overwhelmed and already at capacity, and start looking at how do we create space there too. And again, that involves a lot of those looking at those stories around relationships and maybe their health, whatever it is that creates too much capacity for them at the moment. The second one is that this story that success comes at a great cost. Something bad's going to happen. If I become too successful, people will tear me down. If I become successful, I'm going to lose something else. If I become too successful, I'm going to change as a person. Because they perhaps also hold this story about what successful people are like. Successful people are greedy. Successful people don't have great relationships. Successful people leave other people behind. They could have had experience of this where they've had someone and they felt left behind or abandoned by someone who's then become successful. And rather than dealing with the rejection, it's easier to say that person is a terrible person and it's because they're successful. The reality is, all of my clients are such beautiful women and they're so aligned with their values, there is no way any amount of money would change that. So they have this belief like success will come at such a great cost, and I'm not willing to pay that price. And sometimes that price as well is that price of I'm going to have to spend less time and sacrifice my relationship with my children or my partner, or I'm never going to have fun again. I'm going to have to sacrifice my health because I'm going to have to work so much and get so stressed out when I'm successful. I will have to sacrifice myself, my time, my enjoyment, my relationships, and that success is just not worth it. The third one is success can also bring this great deal of visibility, right? You're probably, if you're on the online space especially, the more successful you are, the more visible you're going to be. It's not even a real word. We're just making up stuff today. Success will come at this great cost because we're going to be more visible, and they're afraid of being more visible. They don't really want people to see them because that means they're opening themselves up for more judgment and more rejection. The more people that see them, the more likely it is people are going to hate on them. And if this feels like you, it's important to get to more specifically, what is it that you're afraid they're going to say? Because this leads to you uncovering your story. So for some of my clients, it's like, if I become really visible, people are going to know. They're going to see through me, right? I'm like, see through what? Because they have this sense of imposter syndrome, for example. They're like, oh, they're going to know I haven't got all my stuff together, right? They're like, they're going to know that actually my life isn't a 10 out of 10 all the time, or my bank account isn't like brimming full of millions of dollars. They're going to figure it out. And you're like, you're human. Your relationships at some point are going to be like up and down. Your health is probably going to be moments of up and down. Your headspace, up and down. Your bank account, if you're in business, it's not this just magic trajectory where it's always up. There's sometimes up and down. Sometimes the comments might be specifically about them, right? I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not smart enough. People are going to think what I'm saying is foolish. And it's usually whatever it is specifically to you, that is the story you need to uncover. Because usually you're not just afraid of any judgment. People could write certain things about you and you'd be like, whatever, moving on, right? And usually when we're afraid of a judgment, a specific judgment, it's because we already hold part of that to be true in ourselves. A part of us already believes that to be true. Maybe you're not pretty enough or smart enough, or you don't always feel like you know what you're saying. Maybe there's an element of self-doubt that what you're saying is really true, or that sense of being a bit of an imposter. Because who you believe yourself to be and how you believe others will portray you as is not the same. And there's this gap. And so when you uncover your story, you'll hear me always bang on about stories. It gives you that first step of awareness. Second step, being able to release that story so you can go and take the action. There's this saying a client said to me before, and it was really interesting. I've heard this a few times actually. Don't get too big for your boots. Has anyone else heard this expression? And it was really interesting to hear it both from a client of mine, and I was also at Toastmasters, where one of the ladies was talking about funny expressions we say. And she was saying where she is, at least she was from Tasmania, she was like, there's this saying, don't get too big for your boots, because people are going to drag you down. It's really bad to get too big for your boots. But sometimes we can interpret this as stay small, especially as women. Stay small, because people will try and tear you down. And unfortunately, because we do live in this world of don't get too big for your boots, it's a reality. And the bigger you get, there will be people there to try to pull you down. But as long as you hold the story that you are safe to be visible, that there will be people, yes, who try to tear you down, who will comment things about you, but that it's okay, then you are still free to go and build that successful business. You're still free to go and show up and be visible and share your message. But it's these stories that created from, experiences you've had, or these crazy sayings like, don't get too big for your boots, that really take the confidence out of so many women. So they are the 3 ways that often impact my clients. There are many, but this is just narrowing it down to 3. How your fear of success is keeping you from making money. If you're here on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe. If you're here listening to the podcast, please feel free to follow. And I will talk to you all soon.